Henry is 32 years old. He just signed the paperwork on a $51,000 SUV. Monthly payment, $847. Walking out of that dealership, he felt something he had been chasing for years. He had arrived. His 42-year-old self would disagree. On the surface, the decision looked completely reasonable, responsible even. He got a good deal. He negotiated the price down. The monthly payment fit the budget, barely, but it fit. He drove home feeling, for the first time in a long time, like he had finally made it. 10 years later, Henry would give almost anything to go back to that parking lot and make a different call. Not because the car was wrong. Because of everything that car quietly set in motion, the choices it closed off, the options it permanently traded away, the version of his life that quietly stopped being possible the moment he signed his name. This video is about the calculation Henry never ran, the one that almost nobody runs before they make the decisions that shape the next decade of their life. And by the end of it, you will have a simple test, I call it the 10-year test, that will make that calculation automatic, every time. Before you spend $1 trying to look like something, let me show you what Henry missed. Here is the question underneath all of it. How is it possible that the people who look the richest are so often the ones with the least? How did we arrive at a place where the people drowning in debt have the nicest cars, and the people quietly building real wealth go out of their way to look completely ordinary? That is the whole video. And to answer it properly, I need to show you 4 things. The actual numbers behind what is happening in America right now, the psychology that makes all of it happen, the real cost of performing wealth, and the playbook the quietly wealthy actually use. And at the end of all of it, I will give you the 10-year test. The one Henry never ran. Let me show you who is actually sitting in that luxury SUV, because the picture is not what the marketing wants you to believe. Heading into 2026, roughly 60% of Americans were living paycheck to paycheck. That number on its own is sobering. But here's the number that should genuinely stop you cold. Around 40% of people earning 6 figures, $100,000 a year or more, were also living paycheck to paycheck. Think about that for a second. 2 out of 5 high earners, the exact people we assume have it all figured out, finish the month with nothing left over. The average American household now spends somewhere around $6,500 a month just to live. That works out to roughly $78,000 a year before a single luxury is added. Meanwhile, the personal savings rate, the slice of income the typical American manages to keep, sat at about 4.5% in early 2026. Historically, that number has averaged closer to 8.5%. We are keeping about half of what previous generations managed, while spending more than ever to look the part. More than half of adults said they could not cover a surprise $1,000 expense out of savings. Over a quarter reported having no emergency cushion at all. The typical emergency savings balance sat at around $600. Not $6,600, $600. That is the actual financial reality humming beneath a lot of those glossy car payments and weekend photos. Henry knew all of these numbers, he had read the articles, he just did not think they applied to him. Here is the part that almost everyone misses, and it explains the whole illusion. The problem is not that people are lazy or irresponsible or bad at math. The problem is that the human brain was wired to read status signals long before money existed. For most of history, those signals carried survival information. Who had food, who had protection, who was worth aligning with. That instinct never disappeared. It just got hijacked. Today, the signals are a watch, a logo, a car, a renovated kitchen, a vacation framed at exactly the right angle. We are not really buying the thing, we are buying a sentence we hope other people will say about us. There is even a name in economics for goods that get more desirable precisely because they are expensive: Veblen goods. The price tag is the point. The object is almost secondary. But here is the cruelest part of all of this. You are not actually performing for real people. The people you are trying to impress are too busy performing right back to notice you. Everyone is dressing up for an audience that is completely distracted by its own costume. It is a room full of actors who forgot there was no audience. Economists have a word for the cycle this creates. The treadmill, you buy the nicer car, you feel the lift for a few weeks, and then that new car quietly becomes your normal. The lift fades, so you reach for the next upgrade just to feel the same spark again. The scenery never changes because you are running in place. And the cruelest twist is that the treadmill speeds up as your income climbs. That is lifestyle inflation. When the raise arrives, the old apartment suddenly feels small, the old car feels embarrassing. The spending creeps up to match the income, then nudges a little past it. A raise that should have bought freedom buys a heavier stack of monthly obligations instead. There is another mechanism that makes this worse, and you have almost certainly felt it without naming it. The lifestyle multiplier. One upgrade sets the new baseline, and everything around it has to rise to meet it. Buy one beautiful chair that makes the rest of the room look shabby, and suddenly the couch has to go, then the rug, then the curtains, then the coffee table that no longer fits the new vibe. Move into the nicer neighborhood, and the pressure arrives uninvited. The unspoken expectation about the kind of car that belongs in that driveway, the vacations the other families take, the schools, the renovations, the version of yourself that fits the zip code. Henry did not buy a car, Henry bought a Cascade. He just could not see it yet. Let me put a hard number on the cost of looking rich, because the math is more punishing than most people ever let themselves see. Start with the single most visible status symbol in American life, the car. In December of 2025, the average price paid for a new vehicle hit a record, just over $50,000. The average monthly payment on a new car climbed to nearly $770, an all-time high. The average new car loan now runs around $44,000. And to make those payments survivable, buyers are stretching loans to lengths that would have sounded absurd a generation ago. More than a third of new car loans now run longer than 6 years. 85-month terms, that is over 7 years of payments on a machine engineered to lose value the moment you drive it home. Nearly 1 in 5 new car loans now carries a monthly payment north of $1,000. And here is the part the luxury ads never mention. Most of those $1,000 payments are not for exotic supercars, they are for trucks, family SUVs, bought by ordinary people who decided the monthly payment was simply the price of looking like they had arrived. The depreciation underneath all of that is the quiet bleed nobody factors in. A new car typically sheds a fifth or more of its value in the first year alone. So when someone signs an 85-month loan, there is a long stretch in the middle where they owe more on the car than the car is worth. They are underwater, paying interest on value that already evaporated. Americans now owe more than $1.67 trillion in auto loan debt. The car, the thing we treat as the obvious badge of having made it, has quietly become one of the largest anchors dragging households under. Now run Henry's car through the 10-year test, $847 a month. 10 years. That is just over $100. $1,000 in payments alone, before interest, before insurance, before the 3 sets of tires, before the 2 repair bills. Henry's 42-year-old self ran that number. Henry's 32-year-old self never did. A car payment is never just a car payment. It is a decision about your future self. Take that average new car payment, call it roughly $750 a month, and imagine doing something quietly radical with it instead. You drive a paid-off used car and you funnel that same $750 into a low-cost index fund every single month. At a long-run average return somewhere around 7% after inflation, that habit grows to well over $100,000 in 10 years. Keep it running for 30 years and you are staring at a figure north of $900,000. The real choice was never nice car or boring car. The real choice was a nicer car now, or close to $1 million later. And the younger you are when you see this math, the more violent the difference becomes. Not because the numbers are bigger, because time is doing the heavy lifting. And time is the one thing you cannot buy back. Every dollar locked into looking wealthy is a dollar that can never go to work becoming wealthy. That is the second price, the one that never appears on the window sticker. The same logic runs straight through every major purchase. Americans were carrying about $1.25 trillion in credit card debt at the start of 2026. For households that carry a balance, the average sat near $6,700. The average interest rate on cards actually charging interest was roughly 21%. When you finance a lifestyle on a card at 21%, you are not just paying for the thing. You are paying the bank a steep monthly fee for the privilege of pretending you could afford it in the first place. Zoom all the way out, and total household debt in America has crossed $18.8 trillion. A meaningful slice of that is not survival or emergency. It is performance. It is the monthly running cost of a costume that fools strangers and quietly robs the person wearing it. Henry had $14,200 on 2 credit cards. He had stopped looking at the balance. That is usually when the number is at its worst. Here is a number that reframes everything, and it is almost completely invisible by design. Income announces itself loudly. Net worth stays nearly silent. And in America, the gap between those two things is staggering. Income is the faucet. Wealth is the tank. The luxury SUV signals a big faucet. It tells you absolutely nothing about the tank. The median household net worth, the true middle, sits at around $192,000. But the average gets reported as roughly $1.06 million because a small number of enormously wealthy households drag the average upward. The median is the honest picture, and it tells you most people own far less than the cars and houses around them suggest. It gets sharper by age. Households under 35 have a median net worth somewhere near $39,000. Here is the line that researchers keep returning to. Your savings rate predicts your future wealth better than your income does. A high earner who saves almost nothing ends up poorer in retirement than a modest earner who quietly kept and invested a fifth of everything. The faucet does not decide who is wealthy. What you do with the water does. 10 years from now, nobody will ask what you drove. You will ask yourself, what is in the tank? Henry had a $94,000 income and a $600 emergency fund. His faucet was running full blast. His tank had a crack in the bottom. Researchers at Experian Automotive found that 61% of households earning more than $250,000 a year do not drive luxury brands at all. They drive Hondas, Toyotas, and Fords. The same cars sitting in your neighbor's driveway. Someone pulling in $250,000 a year could clearly afford the badge. The majority simply choose not to. Most car buyers tie up close to a third of their net worth in vehicles. Actual millionaires spend around 1%. Fewer than a quarter of them were even driving a current year model. They buy used, they buy quality, they drive it into the ground, and they rarely finance it. Around 69% of millionaires never averaged 6 figures in household income in a single year. Nearly a third never had a 6-figure household income across their entire careers. And roughly 80% are first-generation rich, meaning they built it themselves rather than inheriting it. The picture that forms is not a story of giant salaries and glittering lives. It is a story of ordinary incomes meeting unusual discipline. One personal finance author compressed the whole secret into a single sentence worth memorizing. When people stop wasting money trying to look wealthy, they finally have the money to actually become wealthy. Read that again slowly, because it inverts almost everything the marketing world spends billions trying to teach you. Among the genuinely wealthy, visible logos have started to read as insecurity rather than success. The new signal is the absence of a signal. A plainly cut, beautifully made coat with no branding. A quality watch only another collector would recognize. Status gets whispered to the handful of people who already know, rather than shouted at a crowd. Beneath the wealthy, the middle class has started copying the strategy out of pure practicality. There is a movement that picked up the name Underconsumption. The entire point is to use what you already own until it genuinely wears out. To repair instead of replace. To stop performing abundance for an audience that does not care. Families practicing this are redirecting thousands of dollars a year away from the costume and into their brokerage accounts. None of this was secret information. Henry could have read any of it. The problem was not that he did not know. The problem was that he had never really believed it applied to him. Until the morning the envelope arrived. Henry and Marcus were hired the same week, same company, same role, same starting salary. Both sharp, both well-liked. Their manager called them the best new hire class she had seen in years. Henry celebrated the job by leasing the car that matched the title on his business card. He signed for an apartment that stretched the budget to its edge. He upgraded the phone on schedule, the wardrobe in step with every raise, the lifestyle a half step ahead of every paycheck. From the outside, Henry looked like the one who was winning. Marcus kept driving the car he already owned. He split a modest apartment with a roommate for the first 2 years. And on the first day of every month, before he paid a single bill, he moved 20% of his paycheck into a brokerage account. Automatically. Before the money ever touched his checking account. From the outside, Marcus looked like the one who had not quite arrived. If you had run the 10-year test on both of them that first week, same salary, same town, same starting point, the gap would have looked almost too simple to believe. But 10 years is a long time, and compound interest does not care about appearances. Then life did what life does. The company announced layoffs. Both of them got the same envelope on the same morning. Henry had almost nothing saved. The car payment did not pause because the income did. The rent did not pause. The credit card minimums did not pause. Within 3 weeks, he was taking the first job that called, on whatever terms it offered, because the obligations never stopped. Marcus had 8 months of expenses in a liquid account. He turned down the first 2 offers. They were not right. He took the third one, with leverage on his own timeline at better terms than he would have accepted under pressure. Same salary the whole way through, same town, same opportunities, same starting point. The only real difference was that one of them had spent a decade buying the appearance of wealth, and the other had spent that same decade quietly buying the real thing. Henry's 32-year-old self made every decision that made perfect sense in the moment. His 42-year-old self lived with all of them. That is the real cost of looking rich, not the monthly payment. It is the options you quietly trade away, the choices you hand to a future version of yourself who never got a vote. Every time you spend money trying to impress people who are not paying your bills, you are not just losing money. You are betraying the person you are going to become, the version of you who will have to live inside every decision you are making today. Marcus ran the 10-year test. Not formally, not with a spreadsheet. He just had a habit of asking one question before any major financial decision. Will the version of me 10 years from now be grateful for this? Or will he still be paying for it? Henry started asking that question at 42. He would tell you it is a much better question to start asking at 32. Here is the truest measure of wealth, and it might be the most important idea in this entire video. The measure is not the size of the tank either. It is what the tank lets you do. Call it optionality. Can you walk away from a job that is grinding you down? Can you take 6 months off when a family emergency hits? Can you move cities for someone you love? Can you start a business without a guaranteed paycheck? Can you say no to money that would compromise something you believe in? Those choices are what real wealth actually buys. And they are only available to people who built a wide gap between what they earn and what they spend. The person earning $200,000 but spending nearly all of it has almost no options. They are chained to the next paycheck exactly like everyone else, only with nicer scenery. The person earning far less but living well below it has a freedom the big earner can only envy. Every flashy purchase is quietly a trade. You are exchanging future options for present appearances. Sometimes that trade is worth it. Far more often it is not. Henry understood this the morning after the layoff, not as theory, as lived experience. For the first time, he saw what Marcus had been doing all along, not saving, buying options. Once that clicks, the whole strategy stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like a cheat code. So let me hand you the actual playbook. The way the quietly wealthy seem to operate, translated into moves you can start using this week. The first move is to decouple your income from your identity. The reason lifestyle inflation is so dangerous is that we treat a raise as permission to upgrade who we are. A bigger paycheck lands and suddenly the old car feels embarrassing and the apartment feels small. The wealthy interrupt that reflex. When their income rises, their lifestyle mostly holds steady, and the difference flows straight into investments. A raise is not an invitation to spend more. It is a chance to widen the gap between what you earn and what you live on. Because that gap, not the salary, is the thing that eventually turns into freedom. The person who keeps living on last year's budget while earning this year's income is the one quietly winning. The second move is to make saving automatic and spending difficult. Willpower is a terrible long-term plan. It runs out at exactly the wrong moments, when you are tired, stressed, or scrolling at midnight. The wealthy design their environment instead of trusting their discipline. They automate transfers into investments on the very day they get paid, before the money ever feels spendable. They keep only a small, deliberate amount in easy access checking. They delete the shopping apps, remove the saved card numbers, unsubscribe from the promotional emails. A short cooling off window, even a single day, quietly kills a large share of impulse purchases. Most cravings for an object fade on their own if you just refuse to act on them in the moment. The trick is not to be stronger than temptation. It is to never meet it in the first place. The mechanic underneath this is the closest thing personal finance has to a guarantee. Pay yourself first. Most people do it backwards. They earn, they spend on everything that comes up, and then they try to save whatever survives to the end of the month, which is almost always nothing. The wealthy flip the order. The investment comes out first, automatically, the instant the paycheck lands. They build their life around what remains. Same income, completely different outcome, purely because of sequence, and because the contribution is automatic, they keep investing through the scary months as well as the good ones. The person who only invests when they feel confident misses the very dips that build the most wealth. The third move is to drive it till it dies, and extend that same patience to almost everything you own. The fastest way to bleed money is to replace things that still work, either because a newer version exists or because boredom crept in. A phone that makes calls and runs your apps does not need replacing because a slightly better camera launched. The wealthy define broken by function, not by feeling. Until something genuinely fails to do its job, it stays. There is a simple calculation that makes this concrete. Before any purchase, estimate how many times you will realistically use it. Then divide the price by that number. A $200 jacket worn twice costs $100 every time you put it on. A solid jacket worn 200 times costs pennies per wear. Run that math honestly, and most impulse buys collapse on the spot, while the genuinely worthwhile purchases reveal themselves clearly. The fourth move is to test before you commit, especially on anything big or new. So much money dies in the graveyard of abandoned enthusiasm. Closets and garages across America are stuffed with the gear of hobbies that lasted 3 weekends. The wealthy treat a new interest as a hypothesis to be tested cheaply, not a reason to buy the full kit on day one. Rent the equipment first. Borrow the tool. Try the cheap version before the expensive one. Most enthusiasms fade after the first burst, and it is far better to discover that while renting than after you have built an entire room around a passion that turned out to be a phase. When the interest proves real, you will also know exactly what you actually need, instead of guessing and overbuying. The fifth move is to define what enough looks like before the money arrives. High earners get trapped because they never set a finish line. Every bump in income shoves the target further out. They earn more, expect more, and feel exactly as stretched at $300,000 as they did at $80,000. The wealthy decide in advance what a sufficient home, a sufficient car, and a sufficient life actually look like, and then let every dollar beyond that point flow into building the tank. A person who decides that $60,000 of annual spending is genuinely enough, and then goes on to earn well past it, builds wealth at a speed that looks almost unfair from the outside. The secret is not that they earn dramatically more. It is that they stopped moving the goalpost every time they got closer. The sixth move is the quietest and probably the hardest. Mute the comparison feed. A huge share of the pressure to look rich does not come from your real life at all. It pours out of a glowing rectangle, showing you a curated highlight reel of people you will never meet, most of whom are performing a prosperity they cannot afford. You are not actually keeping up with the wealthy. You are keeping up with other stretched people who happen to be very good at lighting. The genuinely wealthy tend to be strangely insulated from this pressure, partly because they measure their progress against their own goals rather than a stranger's feed. Curate what you let in. Follow fewer accounts that exist to sell you a lifestyle. The urge to buy your way into belonging gets quieter almost on its own. None of these moves are complicated. That is the entire point. The strategy of looking poor has nothing to do with hardship or denying yourself a good life. It is about refusing to spend money on the opinions of people who are not paying your bills, and aiming that same money at your own freedom instead. Everything in this playbook sits on top of a foundation, and if that foundation is missing, none of it holds for long. You can know that index funds quietly beat car payments. But if you do not understand how compounding actually works, you will panic and sell at the first downturn and undo years of progress in an afternoon. You can decide to define enough. But if you have never learned the difference between an asset and a liability, between debt that builds you up and debt that quietly eats you alive, you will make confident decisions that happen to be completely wrong. The reason so many high earners end up broke is not that they never heard the advice to spend less. They heard it constantly. What they were missing was the underlying understanding that makes the advice finally click and actually stick. Numbers without understanding feel like superstition. And superstition does not survive a bad week. The people who quietly build wealth are not following more rules than everyone else. They are following the same handful of basic principles, except they understand them deeply enough that the principles hold even when markets drop, even when a coworker brags about a hot tip, even when the pressure to spend gets loud. Understanding is what turns a fragile rule into an unshakable habit. That foundation is exactly what this channel builds. The real mechanics of money, not the highlight reel. If any of this landed today, the next video is the place to start. Now go back to Henry. He is 42 now, he drives a 7-year-old Honda. There is a small dent on the bumper. He has not thought about what anyone else is driving in years. He passed the 10-year test late, but he passed it. And the only thing he regrets is not running it sooner. The goal was never to look rich. The goal was to be free. And freedom is quiet. It does not need a badge, a logo, or an audience watching. It only needs you to understand the game well enough to stop playing the version that was designed to keep you broke. So the next time you feel that pull to spend money proving something to people who are not even watching, remember Henry at 32. Remember Marcus, and remember that the richest move you can make is very often the one nobody can see.